This is a dollar. And this is what the dollar is becoming. Useless. For decades, the dollar has ruled as the world's most dominant currency. It earned the trust of global investors and gave America a huge economic boost. But that's starting to change. Take a look at this chart. In January 2025, the dollar reached its strongest level since 2002. That's more than 20 years ago. But once that peak was over, it began sliding. And it's been falling consistently for the past 7 months and continues to do so still today. So, what's really going on? Why is the dollar slowly losing its dominance over the world? Well, let's find out. This is Jimmy, and you are watching Beyond Economy. To answer the question, we first need to understand what caused it to surge so high suddenly over the last year in the first place. Well, you see, back around September last year, when it started to look like Trump might actually win the election, the dollar began to rise. The best way to see this is through the dollar index. This index measures the strength of the US dollar against a basket of other major currencies. According to the index, the dollar climbed steadily from late September and peaked in early January at almost a 3-year high. But why did Trump's potential return and eventual re-election had such a strong impact on the dollar? Well, there are 3 main reasons for this. Number 1, when Donald Trump came to power, investors expected Trump's policies, like tax cuts and tariffs, to fuel the inflation in the country. Now, generally, inflation is a problem. But in this case, higher inflation often pushes the Federal Reserve to raise the bank interest rates. And when US interest rates rise, saving in dollars becomes much more attractive. Investors can get higher returns, so they rush to buy more dollars. The second reason was that many believed Trump's trade wars would damage other economies more than America's. If countries like China or European nations were hit harder, their currencies would weaken in comparison to the dollar. That made the dollar look stronger by default. And the third reason was that there was some sort of optimism inside the US business community. Trump's promises of tax cuts, deregulation, and a pro-growth agenda boosted confidence of the investors. On top of that, excitement around new technologies like artificial intelligence and quantum computing also added fuel to the idea that the US economy might outpace others and remain strong. So everything was going great. But lately, the situation has flipped. Dollar's continuous fall over the last few months have made the investors not only lose confidence, but also shift their money into some other foreign reserves. So what changed? Well, there are 2 major reasons for this. The first reason is geopolitics, specifically tensions rising in the Middle East. When conflict broke out involving Iran, Israel, and the US, investors briefly turned to the dollar as a safe haven. Normally, that would cause the dollar to strengthen, and for a short time, it did. The dollar saw a temporary boost because, compared to many other currencies, it was still safer. People also moved into US government bonds, which have always been considered a safe bet during uncertain times like war. In addition to that, countries like Europe and much of Asia remain more vulnerable to oil shocks than the USA. A sharp rise in oil prices could completely devastate them. While in the US, now the largest producer of oil, thanks to shale oil, its economy would actually be much safer. That's another reason the dollar didn't collapse entirely during the conflict. But here's the twist. Unlike in the past, the dollar didn't hold on to that safe haven strength for long. Why? Because investors were no longer as confident in the dollar under Trump's leadership. Once Trump announced a ceasefire and markets no longer feared an immediate war in the Middle East, the dollar's safe haven advantage faded quickly. Investors believed that his unpredictable policies, particularly around trade and tariffs, have created fear of higher inflation and restrictions on capital flows. In other words, foreign investors are worried that it won't be as easy or as safe to move money in and out of the US anymore. And this is important. For decades, one of the biggest reasons the dollar was considered the safest currency in the world was its openness. Foreigners could easily invest their money in America, and if they wanted to pull it out, they could do that easily too. That freedom gave them confidence. But under Trump, policies have been proposed that might restrict that movement, even adding taxes on foreign holdings if the administration decides that some another country's tax policies are unfair to the US. all of this has made the dollar less attractive as a safe haven. Now, before we go to the second reason, make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell for our next interesting video coming soon. So let's continue. Now, the second reason why the dollar has been falling lately is because of Trump's continuous clash with the country's Federal Reserve. For months, Trump has been pressuring the Federal Reserve, and especially its chairman, Jerome Powell, to cut the interest rates. But Powell was against this decision because they believe that these rate cuts would boost the economy in the short run, but they also make the dollar less attractive. Why? Because lower interest rates mean lower returns for the investors holding US assets. So far, the Federal Reserve has resisted that idea. Powell and the Board of Governors have kept rates steady, pointing to risks around inflation and uncertainty in the market, especially the inflationary effects of Trump's tariffs, which increased again in July. The Fed believes that cutting rates too soon could fuel inflation instead of controlling it. But as persistent as Donald Trump is, two of the federal governors have already shifted their stance and now support Trump. And on top of that, Trump has publicly attacked Powell, even hinting at replacing him with someone more politically loyal. And this has made the investors nervous because Trump's threat to fire Powell undermines the independence of the Federal Reserve itself. And that independence is absolutely critical. The Fed is supposed to make the monetary policies without any political interference. That's one of the main reasons investors trust the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. If Trump were to fire Powell or replace him with a political ally, confidence in the Fed's ability to control inflation could collapse, and with it, trust in the dollar's long-term stability. And on top of it, recent geopolitical tensions in the Middle East and Ukraine, and the trilateral connection between Russia, India, and China trying to form their own independent currency over BRICS has made the investors much more skeptical about the future of the dollar. So the big question now is, will Trump's policies ultimately strengthen the dollar again? Or could they end up completely destroying America's greatest financial advantage? Make sure to support us by subscribing and clicking the notification bell for more interesting content like this. This is Jimmy, and you are watching Beyond Economy.